Good evening. My name is Leela Boykin. Would you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. I have the honor of welcoming you to the historic Near East Side, to the historic King Arts Complex, and welcoming you to the Near East Side neighborhood conversation. I trust that you will be engaging, visionary, and happy about this community conversation. I'd like to share with you some words from two women who were very insightful during their life, and their words will ring out to us to this day. One is from Maya Angelou, who said, "Ask for what you want and be prepared to get it." Helen Keller said, "The only thing worse than being blind without sight is having no vision." So I challenge you to put on your visionary hats this evening. And lastly, Helen Keller said, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." And I hope those words remain with you as you participate in this community conversation, and also as the panelists are sharing their ideas and thoughts with you. Welcome again to the Near East Side, to the King Arts Complex, and please don't be a stranger. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Columbus. It is good to be with you this evening. Will you please bow with me for a word of prayer? Creator God, we gather here today in a spirit of thanksgiving for who you are and all that you've done for us. Please give us perspective to see the challenges we face with your eyes. Please give us the temperament to respond to the circumstances we encounter with your heart. We also thank you for the leadership that our Mayor, Andrew Ginther, is providing to all the people in this wonderful city in which we live. Please continue to bless him and his family and keep them safe in your care. We are also grateful for the leadership of City Council President Shannon Hardin and all those who work on behalf of this great city. Help us together to hold up their arms as they help to lead all those who desire to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And tonight, as we lift up the voices of women in leadership, and we thank you for allowing us to celebrate our diversity, but also embrace those things that we have in common. Goals for affordable health care, quality education for our children, good jobs, and safe communities. A famous woman said, "Always aim high, work hard, and care deeply about what you believe in. And when you stumble, keep faith, and when you're knocked down, get right back up, and never listen to anyone who says you can't or you shouldn't go on." Finally, in your infinite wisdom, we ask that you will bless this country that we love and all who are in it. Help us to take care of the least of these. Help us to bring justice to places where it is absent. Help us to be a voice for those who are voiceless. And we know that in you all things are possible. It is in your matchless name that we pray, and the people of God say together, amen.
Good evening. I'm Shannon Ginther, First Lady of the City of Columbus and Chair of the Columbus Women's Commission. I believe in the power of women's stories. I believe in passionately seeking answers. I believe in the women of Columbus. When my husband took office 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to put my efforts behind this community, and I knew right away that I wanted to concentrate in one area: advancing the economic well-being of Columbus's women. In early 2017, the mayor and I launched the Columbus Women's Commission. The issues the commission is addressing are real. When looking at women's economic position in Columbus, Ohio, we know that 1 in 4 women lacks basic economic security. Women are 2/3 of our minimum wage workers. 38% of women earn less than $15 an hour in the Columbus metropolitan area. And for Columbus women working full-time, they make 78 cents on the dollar for every dollar a man earns, below the national average for pay equity, which is around 80 cents on the dollar. Nationally, African American women and Latino women fare even poorer, earning 63 cents on the dollar and 54 cents on the dollar, respectively. The Columbus Women's Commission held multiple community outreach meetings and focus groups, uncovered layers of data, and listened to the stories of Central Ohio's women. The commission convened conversations to build on existing work in our community to identify where the commission is uniquely positioned to create change. We also participated in a multitude of community events through speaking engagements, panels, and presentations. Through these events, we were able to engage thousands of residents to elevate women's issues in Columbus. So, to impact women's economic position, the charge of the commission is focused around 4 key areas facing women in our community: pay equity, housing and safety, health, and workforce development. To impact pay and equity, we launched the Columbus Commitment, Achieving Pay Equity. The Columbus Commitment is a voluntary, employer-led initiative to close the gender wage gap in Columbus. We know that Columbus thrives when 100% of our residents have the opportunity to succeed. This includes promoting innovation to address gender and race-based inequalities. As of today, 91 companies and organizations, including the City of Columbus, have signed the Columbus Commitment to understand, analyze, and act to share best practices and solutions focused on closing the gender wage gap in our great city. We believe that together we can make bold things happen. We believe that diversity is mighty. We believe in the women of Columbus. It is now my great pleasure to introduce my husband, my partner in crime, Mayor Andrew J. Ginther.
Thanks, man. Good evening, and it is great to be here with you tonight. I want to thank Shannon for being an incredible partner and for all of the great work she and the Women's Commission are doing. I'd like to welcome you to our 4th State of Columbus Neighborhood Conversations. I'm a little biased, but I think the Civil Air Patrol cadets deserve another round of applause for posting of the colors. I would like to thank the amazing and wonderful Leila Boykin for the incredible welcome to this neighborhood. Leila, thank you for being here and being part of this, and to Pastor Donetta Peaks for her invocation. And I want to thank Marha Davis, who's offering sign language interpretive services this evening. Thank you for what you're doing to make sure we're reaching as many people as we can. And I'd like to thank our elected officials that are here. From Columbus City Council, we have Council President Shannon Hardin, President Pro Tem Michael Stinziano, Council members Elizabeth Brown, Mitch Brown, Jiza Page, Emmanuel Remy, and Council member Priscilla Tyson. Can you give them a round of applause? I'd also like to recognize some of our other great partners, our new city auditor, Megan Kilgore, the clerk of Franklin County Municipal Court, Lori Tyak, our treasurer, Cheryl Brooks Sullivan, our state representative here, Bernadine Kennedy Kent, and our state senator, Charlita Tavares. Please give them a round of applause. And now the most dangerous part of the night. Are there any elected officials that I missed that are here tonight? I don't want to find about it the hard way later. I'd also like to thank my cabinet and my staff for putting together a different approach to the usual State of the City address. Tonight, I would specifically like to thank Shelley Biting, the Executive Director of the Columbus Women's Commission, and Steve Francis, our Chief Diversity Officer. And I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight, and for those of you who are joining us via live stream. In last year's State of the City address, I laid out ambitious plans for our city to have a tangible, long-lasting impact on the lives of all of our residents. We set clear goals to ensure that every person in every neighborhood is sharing in the success story that is Columbus. This was not a one-year agenda, but a multi-year plan. And this plan cannot be accomplished without our community partners. Tonight, we will discuss and focus our conversation on the work of the Columbus Women's Commission and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, both of which focus on making Columbus America's equal opportunity city. As Shannon said a few moments ago, the charge of the Columbus Women's Commission is really focused on 4 key areas that face women in our community: pay equity, housing, health, and workforce development. The Commission has had overwhelming support from the community and a number of early successes. As she mentioned, nearly 100 companies and organizations have already signed the Columbus Commitment to focus on achieving pay equity because they recognize the importance of exploring and conquering the pay gap in our community. The next steps on pay equity are to continue to grow the list of participating Central Ohio companies and to provide them with information and best practices from around the country that we've identified for closing the gender and race-based gap that still exists in their companies and in our community. Members of the Columbus Women's Commission continue to personally reach out to potential adopters of the Columbus Commitment. They do such incredible work in our community. I know several members of the commission are with us tonight. Can they please stand so we can recognize them? Thank you, commissioners. The Columbus Women's Commission is also tackling evictions because many of those facing eviction are women in families, in particularly African American women and families residing in our own community. Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority did a report that indicates that women really are the face of homelessness. In 2016, their shelter data reflected the following: 95% of families staying at shelters in this community are headed by women. 95%. 71% are African American. And on average, families at shelters had 2 children, the majority of them age 7 or younger. And the mom's average age was 31. While there are many reasons why homelessness occurs, there is a clear connection between evictions and homelessness. The Commission has turned its focus to evictions, including court practices and experiences of those facing eviction. We are looking to make a positive change in this arena in the months to come. Because of the Columbus Women's Commission, several of our community partners have stepped up and are deploying additional resources to support tenants facing eviction. Franklin County Jobs and Family Services has now dedicated a staff position to eviction court to be a link for individuals and families facing eviction. Last year, the Legal Aid Society of Columbus added additional legal support for tenants facing eviction. It's going to take multiple partners with a variety of strategies for us to change our community's eviction statistics. We have a different story to tell, and we collectively are going to tell it. We thank Franklin County Jobs and Family Services and Legal Aid for all of their great partnerships. The Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the focus in our mission is pretty simple: to make sure that the city reflects the beautiful diversity of our residents, from our workforce and our leadership to those who we do business with. To help boost the city's workforce diversity efforts, Columbus has entered into a partnership with Franklin University to offer tuition reimbursement for city employees in more of the school's curriculum offerings. In addition, the city recently launched a citywide recruitment task force in partnership with Human Resources and Civil Service in an effort to make the city of Columbus an employer of choice among diverse residents. And last year, the city launched a disparity study to determine whether minority and female-owned businesses are receiving their fair share of municipal contracts. This report is going to be an evidence-based foundation that will help us determine how to make sure those contracts are equally available to all of our suppliers. And we expect the results of that disparity study by the end of March. I'm happy to report that we've had some successes already. 13.5%, more than $10 million of the total cost of construction of the newly completed Michael B. Coleman Government Center was spent with minority and women-owned businesses in this community. And last summer, we held a first-of-its-kind Ohio Municipalities Business Conference. More than 500 startups, entrepreneurs, and small business owners from all over the state came to participate in an interactive platform to build and grow their businesses. The City of Columbus is also committed to building a culture of inclusivity, overcoming barriers such as implicit bias. You know, we all have biases. The Kerwin Institute at The Ohio State University has discovered that the biases operate largely beneath the radar of human consciousness. Awareness of implicit bias is the first important step to combating the unwanted effects of such biases and aligning our judgment, decisions, and other behaviors with our values. Implicit bias is imperative for our first responders. And we're lucky that we have a progressive chief of police who's been a champion of making sure that all of her officers receive this training. Many other managers throughout the city are also required to have implicit bias training. And now we are making the training available to all of our city workers. In short, recognizing our biases is the first step in making city employees better to work with and serve the diverse residents across our city. Late last year, we also signed the Community Benefits Agreement, covering the construction of Fire Station 35 on the far east side. For the first time ever, we established enhanced cooperation between workers and the city that eliminates the possibilities of labor disputes and includes possibilities for great opportunities for young people in our community. provisions of this agreement are going to focus on increasing apprenticeship opportunities in the construction trade and recruitment plans geared toward minorities, women, and low-income residents. We know that, if we're honest with ourselves, historically, women and people of color have not been well represented in the trades. We also know that the construction trades are booming right now. 73% of Ohio construction companies are having trouble finding qualified workers. To address that issue, each union signing the Community Benefits Agreement will create and implement diversity and inclusion plans that are specific and measurable. And as you know, as I have said before, and you know I'll say again, if you don't measure it, you don't mean it. And I mean it. We need partners in all of this important work. And tonight you'll hear from people and organizations who are helping us reach our goals. Before I introduce our panelists, let me tell you a little bit about how this evening will work. So for the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to ask some questions to our panelists and have them share some of their perspectives who are working on some of these issues in our community. And then it's your turn. You should have all been given a card when you walked in. If you have a question about tonight's topics, please fill out the card. Please get it to a member of my team. We'll gather the questions and get to as many of them as time allows. And if you're watching from home, post your question online. We will likely not get to every question, but if you include your contact information, my team will get back to you. Now, let me introduce our outstanding panel for tonight. Please welcome Christie Angel, the President and CEO of the YWCA. Tom Grote, Chief Entrepreneur and Advocate. Gale King, Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer for Nationwide. Professor Robert Solomon, Assistant Vice Provost, Office of Diversity and Inclusion, The Ohio State University. And Ariana Ulloa-Olavarrieta, Executive Coach with Lights. And last but certainly not least, our great president of the local chapter of the NAACP, Nana Watson. Welcome, and thank you all for being here tonight for this important conversation, and appreciate your willingness to share your perspectives on the work we're doing in neighborhoods across the city. I'll put Gale on the spot to dive right in. Gale, last month, Nationwide was named as the recipient of the prestigious 2018 Catalyst Award, which honors companies for their exceptional work to advance women in business. Tell us about some of your company's workplace inclusion initiatives to ensure that all of your associates have the opportunity to succeed. I know you have a huge champion and partner in Steve Rasmussen, your CEO. We know that's important, but most people don't think of the insurance industry as being a place where women and people of color might thrive, sort of the old boys club, if you would, suggest it or generalize it as. So how have you done it nationwide, and what can we learn from your work?
All right. Well, first of all, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, and thank you, Mayor Ginther, for the opportunity to represent Nationwide today.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to telling the story. I think at the end of the day, first of all, Catalyst is an organization that recognizes companies who are committed to making a difference in advancing women in the workplace. And I'm extremely proud to share that we won that this year and are being recognized because of the work that we've done, not only with having women represented on our board of directors, but also over 33% of the women in our workplace in the senior levels are women. So we're extremely proud of that. But the way we've done it is really because the way everything is done. It begins at the very top of the house, and you called out the fact that our CEO, Steve Rasmussen, is totally committed to an organization where everyone can be successful, but also our board is committed. I mean, we're proud that over 26% of the people on our board are females. And then again, everything then cascades from there. And so one of the things that we're proud of at Nationwide is that we have a very strong heritage, a heritage that understands that if people are successful, if the people in our business are successful, our members are successful, and Nationwide can continue to grow. And so it starts with CEO and board championship, and then it cascades down to accountability, and it cascades down to sponsorships and different types of programs. So some of the things that we've done is around cultural investment. So you can't work at Nationwide if you don't value all people. And you know, when I interview people and they ask me, so tell me, what's the one thing that will get me terminated? What will happen? And I tell them, first of all, that we can't hear you if you can't hear us. So you've got to come into our organization and you have to listen to us. But most importantly, you have to respect what we respect, and we respect our people. So again, it begins with that cultural investment. We do a lot of training around things that matter to us. We do a lot with developmental opportunities. There are so many Nationwiders here today, and you know, and I want to just acknowledge them, but we believe in investing in our people. We have great partnerships. So again, if you're going to bring people into the organization, you have to have strategic partnerships. So we partner with organizations that will help us identify talent. The National Black MBA, the Latina Style, all of those organizations that will help us grow. And at the end of the day, it really is about accountability. So the board expects us to provide an update on engagement. How do our associates feel about our company? And one of the questions is around the diversity. Our CEO and every manager at Nationwide has a 30% MBO. And in that MBO, we're looking to say, what environment are you creating? What's the engagement of your teams? We look at the metrics of our organization. So again, everything begins at the top of the house, and everything happens when you have the appropriate measurements and commitments in place. So.
Measurements, commitments, expectations.
Yes, thank you.
Setting the tone at the top.
Yes.
So, Nana, Christie, Ariana, all of your organizations, a good part of your focus and concentration is around equity for women, eliminating racism, empowering women, the work of the NAACP. Talk a little bit about your organizations and the work that you're doing to make sure that individuals and diverse groups are enjoying the success that we're seeing in other parts of the city.
Do you want to go alphabetically, Christie?
Absolutely. A first. So the YWCA, I mean, our mission is to eliminate racism and empower women. And we've been around since 1886. If you've been around since 1886, that's a lot of change, right? And we've evolved as our community has evolved. Where we are today is that we offer programs and services for people who are in need and in crisis. And so those are families who are experiencing homelessness. You heard the mayor talk about 70% of the families that are experiencing homelessness are African Americans. I walk into our shelter every day and I see people who look like me, younger than me, most of them, and with children. So we help those families get on their feet to a point where they can find housing and stability so that they can take care of themselves and their families and get back up on their feet. And then we have women who live in our downtown building. There are 91 wonderful women who live in that building. They have had a mental health diagnosis. They were formerly homeless, and we give them a safe place to live, and we teach them the skills that they need to be successful and independent and to live their lives to their fullest capacity, having dealt with some of the challenges that they've dealt with through the years. But then we offer, I can't forget, latchkey services, before and after school care services in the suburbs. So it's in Gahanna and Westerville. We work with our school partners so that children in those communities have places to go when they get out of school. They don't have to leave school. They go into our classroom and we give them a healthy environment to thrive while mom and dad or their parents are working, and their parents come and get them, and they have gotten started on homework and all those kinds of things. But then your why, and we are your why. Your why provides services that teach people about social justice work. And we teach people how to be civil and tolerant, and they come to our building and they have respectful conversations where we too value all people and all voices are heard. We are about breaking down barriers and empowering women, and for us there is a lot that goes into that work. And so we work with young women that are 15 years old and older, and we are helping them change the world, because we know that our why back in 1886 started with one idea, one person who was willing to lead and to step up to change the world, and that's what we're about.
Ariana?
All right, thank you. Are you going? Oh, okay, we're just jumping around. Mayor, thank you so very much for the invitation, and I bring you greetings from the oldest and the boldest civil rights organization in Columbus. Everybody knows that's what I like to say, because that's who we are. The NAACP, as you all know, we agitate and communicate in a very positive way. A lot of people can't accept it, but we're okay with that. How do we ensure that individuals from diverse groups are enjoying all that is available? We have 5 game changers that we impart to the community: economic sustainability, education, health, voter education. We like to encourage the voiceless. We are representative of the voiceless and the faceless in our community. We've got to begin to engage them and to ensure that they are able to participate in the marketplace. We want fair and equitable treatment for all. If not, we're at a loss, and the community is not going to be healthy. And it's about the common good for this community, not individually, but collectively.
Ariana?
Hi, everyone. So our job in the region is to go out and make sure that anyone that wants to start to start a business is able to. So you have an idea, you have a product, come to us and we'll help you figure that out, right? So immigrants, women are the fastest growing segments of the population that are starting successful businesses. And so our job is to make sure that the community is aware that that's a possibility. How do you get licensing? How do you get certified with the City of Columbus? How do you get certified with the State of Ohio? What are the differences? What are the opportunities available to you outside of employment? Not everyone wants to be an employee, so if you have that dream, our job is to make sure that you have the opportunity to do so.
So Professor Solomon, each year OSU and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion there hosts the National Conference on Diversity, Race, and Learning. Tell us a little bit more about that conference and what it offers to institutions of higher education, the corporate world, and the larger community.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Ginther, and good evening, everyone. The National Conference on Diversity, Race, and Learning is in its 24th year. On May 8th, we will be hosting it again here. And I suppose that its primary goal is to create a space for learning and education for diversity and inclusion professionals. Mm-hmm. And so to that end, it really ranges the spectrum from those who are in higher education, the corporate world, activists, those who are involved in the community. And so the programming is actually designed to meet those various needs of a wide range of individuals. So it's not just focused on those in higher education. So we bring in experts from all over the country to really talk about different aspects of what's going on today, some of the challenges that we face and how to deal with them. One of the great challenges of dealing with diversity and inclusion is that many people don't really understand it. You know, the D word is a bad word for a number of people. Some of us who've dealt with it have diversity fatigue. Oh, Lord, let's not talk about that again. So you have all these things that's going on. So proper education is vitally important. And so we try to get people to think of it in terms of several buckets. I like to call them the 4 C's: community, climate, culture, and curriculum. Community asks the question, who's here and who's missing? And in every sphere, we can ask that question, whether it's in the C-suite for a corporation, whether it's in higher education, whether it's in city services, who's missing and why aren't those people here at the table, and try to get an understanding of how to bring them here. But once you're at the table, once you're there, what's the culture? What kind of culture? Is it a place that everyone can thrive? Can we be a part of it? And then the climate. What is it like to be here? Will people stay? And I add curriculum, and although most people don't think of that in terms of entities outside of higher ed, but that's training, growth, learning, understanding, so that we can expand our minds and our opportunities. And this message is that many of our challenges come from the lack of communication and our unwillingness to have difficult conversations. We can get out of those difficult conversations and we can make progress, but we have to have them. And if we don't have them, we won't be able to solve problems.
So, Tom, the Grote family knows a thing or two about business and has been pretty successful at that part of life. We haven't touched on yet why diversity and inclusion is so important to economic development. We're starting to hear more and more stories about it. I know that our corporate community, our business community, were great leaders decades ago on domestic partner benefits, you know, the Huntingtons, the Nationwides, the other great corporate leaders, American Electric Power, others. The city put on the books decades ago, non-discrimination policy, really trying to becoming a very inclusive place, and domestic partner benefits as well. Fortunately, we now have marriage equality, which is important, but there's still not non-discrimination from a statewide perspective. So when we're going after the Amazons of the world and these other great companies who have to attract the best and the brightest, not just from around the country and the world, how does diversity and inclusion and a commitment to pay equity and the work of the Women's Commission, how do we land those companies in the future?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm absolutely honored to be sitting on this panel with all of you. I called some of you in advance and got to introduce myself, Nana. I am honored to be serving on this panel. And Mayor, thank you for everything you've done for diversity and inclusion, particularly with an LGBTQ community. I wanted to share something before I answer that question, and that is, I am a product of all of the, I'd say, advances that have been made in LGBTQ community and the way that the city has embraced our community. 38 years ago, when the Stonewall Pride Parade started, there were only about 50 people marching, and some of them had paper bags over their heads. Okay? That's how it was back then. And here we are today. Columbus has a 100% rating by the Human Rights Campaign, 100%. They can't do any better than that with the Human Rights Campaign. There are other things to do, though, I will tell you. And
there's always work to do.
Always work to do, because we want to be, you know, Columbus wants to be at the top, right? Mm-hmm. We want to attract all of these folks. And I have to also share that I literally pinch myself every day because I get to be married, legally married to my husband, Rick Neal, who's in the audience. And I get to have a beautiful family. I have an 8-year-old daughter, Amarette, who's over there, right there. Hi, Amy. Hi. And a 6-year-old daughter, Sophia. Hi, Sophie. Sophie's been winking at me. I get to have that. And when I was in high school at St. Charles, I was scared to death. I didn't think I was going to get to have that. And I had some dark times. I'm going to make it personal. I had some very dark times in my life. And I could have made different choices. And I chose to fight for myself. And I chose to become an advocate for the LGBT community. I chose to fight for marriage equality. And today I get to be married, legally married to my husband. And just a couple years ago, that couldn't be possible. And here I am in this wonderful city that embraces our family, okay? So thank you, Mayor, for that. Thank you very much. And I just want to touch on a couple things because I said I pinch myself every day because I am lucky. But I wasn't doing that 38 years ago. I was scared. And there's other folks in our community and the LGBTQ community that are scared. We're not there yet. And think about our transgender parts of our community and those folks. I mean, come on. This is terrible what's happening. And nationally, you know, federally being attacked, right? And thank God for this city. Thank God for the attitude that this city has toward our transgender folks. But guess what? There are no transgender persons in leadership that I can find in the city, and we need that, okay? We need transgender folks in our, and there are some great leaders. Melissa Marie Alexander, who runs Trans Ohio, is here in this city. And Lana Moore, who used to be, you know Lana.
Captain.
Captain in the fire department, right? She is in this city. She is a leader. Kimberly Sue Griffiths is in this city. She is a leader. So we have some fantastic leadership here that we need to lift up. And then I just want to share two other quick things. Our trans community, our youth. 40% of homeless youth are LGBT or Q. 40%. Now there's a reason for that. They're getting kicked out of their houses, and in the trans area especially, because people don't yet get some of these issues. And our trans community is where the gay and lesbian community was about 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, is that a lot of lies were being told because it was, you know, because it was easy to do to scare the crap out of people. That's what's happening to our trans community today. So the city is doing great work, but lift up our trans community and tell the truth. Make sure people know and embrace our trans community. So our youth, our trans community, and lastly, in our community, LGBTQ people of color, all right? Invisible. People need to be seen, and they need to be heard, and in our LGBT community, we have work to do. We have work to do to make sure that we're more inclusive and that we're listening. And one of the things that I've heard recently from a very good friend, an African-American friend, and she said, and she has a son, she said, my son and I am afraid of the police. That is very real to me. And I have to tell you, with two African-American daughters, that made me very sad. And that is not just, that is a national issue, right? And I say, I just, as a member of the LGBT community, want to work with others on this panel. And I want to do everything we can so that my friend can say, I'm not worried about my son going out at night, okay? That is very important to me. So I want our LGBTQ community, Mayor, to embrace, because we're everywhere. Just like the Women's Commission, a lot in common, right? We're everywhere. We have poverty, we have it all. So I just want our community to work with all of you to put our arms around all of those groups. And that will help our economic development. So there's your answer to that. Sorry about that.
Well, I'll really open it up to everybody here. I mean, whether you're, you know, running a business, starting a business, talk a little bit about how the Amazons and other companies of the future, even if their leadership is not people of color or women or from the LGBT community, they want to grow in communities that are inclusive, that are welcoming, so they can get, even if you don't necessarily agree with it, we agree with it as a value and a priority. Even if you don't agree with it from that standpoint, it's a really, really good business decision to move to communities where people from all walks of life feel welcome and accepted. Anybody else want to chime in on that? And I think the other point that I made, the state of Ohio still has not acted. And so one of the challenges, and we've even seen this with Amazon more recently, because there aren't protections at a statewide level, even though we have them at a local level, the importance for us from an economic development standpoint to get that done.
I mean, I think that's that's the key, is that we are all fortunate enough to live in Columbus, where, from an immigrant point of view, we don't have the same protections that we have here in Columbus as immigrants do across the state. I mean, it's and I think that's something that I think it's our job. It's for us to go out and make sure that the elected officials statewide are going to be doing the same things that are happening here in Columbus. You know, everyone gets to live the way we do here.
You know, Mayor, I would just like to say diversity is the dance and inclusion is the party. And so we all have to dance so we can go to the party. And we have to begin to embrace diversity regardless of your gender, your race. We all have to be together collectively so we can be at the party. Because we're dancing right now, but we need to be at the party.
So back to the business case for diversity and inclusion. Gale, you've been one of the most passionate advocates around the Columbus commitment to Achieving Pay Equity Pledge. You were a driving force, Women's Commission to recruit additional companies. I know some of the CEOs and companies you called because they told me you did, to get them on board. And I personally have seen your passion and drive around this work. So let's talk about, you know, the business case there. If women are only making 78 cents for every dollar, men are making, and the rates are much lower for women of color, African American women, Latinas. What I continue to talk to people is the unrealized, untapped buying power associated with pay equity. But talk a little bit about your work at Nationwide and how you've been able to get those other companies to make this commitment.
You know, I think I said this, let me move this up a little bit, is that I don't think that people are intentionally not doing the right things. Because I don't think people wake up in the morning and just say, hey, you know, I want to discriminate against women and those types of things. I think that they don't take the time, you know, to look and understand what's actually happening in their organizations. So one of the beauties of being on the Women's Commission, and I do want to call out your wife for her incredible leadership with that. So if you would, let's give First Lady Ginther a big round of applause for just doing some great work. So what I think is that, you know, because I didn't realize that there was such a gap. And so as a result of being on the Women's Commission, understanding what the national gap was and then hearing what the gap was for Columbus was really surprising to me. Because as a company, Nationwide is very much interested in ensuring that Columbus is a city where people want to come because the war for talent is real. So again, you know, once we fully so I got involved with it, one, professionally, because we are constantly in the business of ensuring that we can bring talent here. And people want to come to a community in which they feel that everything is thriving, because if we hire a Nationwider, they bring their spouses and others along. So again, I think once getting your arms around what the facts are and saying, does that really represent the city? And then I think personally saying, is that the right thing to do? As a female, I certainly want to be paid the same as anyone else for the work that I do. So it was professionally the right thing to do, and personally it was the right reason to get involved.
So Professor, I think we clearly have talked about why pay equity you know, is important, but it's not just a women's issue, right? I mean, so talk about why closing the gender and race-based gap is so important to this community and communities around the country.
Yes, absolutely. I think the first, I mean, we from a very intuitive sense, we know that it's a moral imperative, right? Why in the world would you pay one person less for the same work? So it's a moral imperative, but it's also an economic imperative. And I think that Gale really honed in on the idea of drawing people to a community. I mean, we see it all the time in the university. You know, we have this superstar, but what are we going to offer their spouse or their partner that's coming? Whether it's male or female, either way it goes, it needs to be an environment that will create opportunity for the whole family, and those people can come to the community and really feed into the economy that's here. Another point that I wanted to focus in on, to piggyback on what Gale said, was that often we look for the bad actor, and we spend our energies trying to find the bad actor. Sometimes there is no bad actor, but they're bad systems. And we need to address the systems that create it. So the policies, right, that might impact women who are primary child caregivers, or maternity leave policies. You know, all those sorts of things can stunt someone's career if they are penalized in some way because they're going through these life changes. So we have to think of this more broadly, not just looking for the bad actor, but look at the systems, oppressive systems that create these disparities. And I would also say that we are looking at valuable resources, that we can ill afford to overlook all the valuable resources, and we need to mine those resources for the benefit of our community as a whole, and it will help our economy because we will be thriving. Men and women and people of different races and orientations are contributing in an equal way to the benefit of our society, and then our economy will grow and it will draw more people to it. And I will add this, and something that we've discovered in higher ed, it's not just the minorities that want a welcoming environment. It's not just the LGBTQ community that wants this welcoming environment, but there are many majority individuals who don't have those identities that also want an environment of equality and parity. So when we don't have it, we turn away not only those individuals who may have marginalized identities, but we're also turning away people who want an environment that embraces it.
They want to live in that environment, raise their
Yes.
family in that environment, and if they're hiring, they want to be able to attract the best and the brightest, and that's
Yes.
going to include folks across the spectrum.
Absolutely.
Ariana, the race-based gender wage gap is significant, and most of the research has shown that Latinas experience the largest gender pay gap. So in your work with minority-owned firms and entrepreneurs and business owners, what are you seeing, and what are some things that we can be doing to help close this gap for Latinas that are most dramatically impacted by it?
Yeah, thank you. You know, for small business owners, it's the same issue as far as women and minorities overall don't value themselves the same way others do. So a lot of the work that we do has been around making sure that they value the service or product that they are providing. So, you know, really work with them on the fact that they are not their own target market. So even if they're not willing to pay a certain price for it, other people are, right? And really encouraging them to ask for what they're worth. I mean, it's really making sure that minorities and women are standing in their power and understand the worth of what they are providing, and then also seeking out opportunities, like with the city, with the state, and even, you know, working with other bigger small businesses that they could go into a contract together. But it's really making sure that they understand that there are all these opportunities out there for them. They just get to really know their worth and go after them.
So Christie, both Shannon and I talked a little bit about evictions. And I think we talked a little bit about, I have certainly learned more in the last couple of years than I ever knew before about how evictions dramatically undermine family stability, neighborhood strength and safety. The transiency of family impacts children's academic achievement. It really, once an eviction takes place, it truly starts, in some cases, a dramatic downward spiral for families. Can you help talk a little bit about what you've learned about what evictions do to women and families, and what the commission is looking to take on with it?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you and to First Lady Ginther for, you know, standing up the Women's Commission. It is It is an honor to serve. It's great work. We have a lot to do, but we're very focused, and so our focus has turned to evictions. And let me start just with a view of what eviction looks like. We started by looking at the data, right? And we the Women's Commission, we realized that there were close to 18,000 eviction filings last year. 18,000 last year. Then, Mayor, as you mentioned, we have one of the highest eviction rates in Franklin County. So then,
Much more so than larger cities.
much more so than larger cities. We have more evictions here than New York City.
Think about that for a minute.
Yeah, think about that. And then we visited the court system. We watched the process. We have a process in Franklin County where they do kind of batch eviction. So, just think about large numbers of people just being evicted. Think about the tenant, the landlord doesn't have to be present, but the tenant does, right? How hard is that, right? A tenant who may, have a child in childcare, work an hourly job, all of that, and they have to be in court, and the landlord doesn't have to be present. The landlord typically has a lawyer. The tenant typically doesn't have a lawyer because the tenant's probably being evicted for non-payment of rent most of the time. So the tenant doesn't have money to have a lawyer, right? And they probably didn't have time to go get, a legal aid attorney or something like that. We looked at the 2016 data, and of the 54 zip codes in Franklin County, 41% of the filed evictions came from 6 zip codes. The Hilltop on the west, Whitehall and Black Lick to the east, and Northland to the north are the highest. 70% large numbers of the women evicted, and most of the time it is women in eviction court. Once again, they look like me. So that in and of itself just kind of knocks you down to your knees, right? And then you think about what eviction does to a person's record. Eviction, as Matthew Desmond, who wrote the book Evicted, said, is really, women's form of mass incarceration, especially women of color. Because once it's on your record, then it's harder to get another place to live. So you start renting places that are substandard, maybe not up to code, but you've got to find a place to live. And now you fall prey to a landlord who takes advantage of you, and so on and so on and so on. And then eventually, guess what happens? You couch surf, you live with a friend or a neighbor, and then you end up in one of our family shelters that are always full, always full. So the Women's Commission is starting to focus now on recommendations. We know the data, we know what this looks like, but we know it has to change in our county. And we are the largest county in Ohio that has this batch eviction process. So what you can expect from us in the coming months, very, very soon, is we're going to change policy, right? Because you got to change policy and systems, just as Robert said, in order to really get at the problem. And so we're going to look to create a more fair and equitable system as it relates to the eviction practice in Franklin County. We've been working across, with all policymakers, and soon we hope to have a much more level playing field. And hopefully then that will be one start to start, seeing people be on their way to have housing and be successful. And Mayor, I also want to say that, you started when you were on council, Celebrate One, and looking at infant mortality. And we know if a child, a mother is pregnant and doesn't have housing, the likelihood of her delivering that baby preterm or that baby dying within its first birthday, right? There's the percentages, I don't even remember the percentages, but they're way off the charts. And so housing is a start of it. Housing is the start. And so we've got to stop this eviction practice, and we've got to get ahead of that, and then we've got to look at other things that keep people housed, because then we can feed people, clothe people, get people to work, get kids educated.
Housing is the great vaccine, right?
It is.
The most powerful
It is
vaccine.
certainly a start.
So Nana, talk a little bit about this racial disparity you're seeing with housing and the challenges that African American women in particular are facing out there.
I believe the answer is very clear, Mayor. Jobs, economic sustainability. We have to begin to create wealth, if you will. You talked about the CBA, that we were pleased to be a signer on that.
Talk to us a little bit about that. You've been involved with that from the beginning, and how is that different than anything else you've worked on before, and what are you hoping and expecting out of that?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting the NAACP to the table. Planning in the beginning as opposed to planning afterwards, planning with as opposed to planning for. We're excited about the opportunity. I would hope that other municipalities would use this as a model. We're talking about blacks getting jobs, we're talking about women, and hopefully some of the homeless women will be able to participate in an apprenticeship program. So I believe that it's an excellent program, and the NAACP cannot thank you enough for inviting us to the table, and I just salute you for that.
Thank you.
So to answer your question, it's about jobs for women, regardless of your color, but you know I represent issues of black people, but everybody, you're the mayor of everybody, so I needed to just preface that. So thank you, and I hope that we will be able to recruit more women to work on this job, Brian, than men. Okay? Did that answer it?
It did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
How are we doing on time? We got a few more minutes. Are there any other questions that folks want to submit? I've got a few here, but if there are any other questions to be submitted, please get those to our staff. So let's talk a little bit about certification for minority-owned businesses, female and minority-owned businesses. Ariana, this is something you work on every day. What can we be doing to ensure that more businesses, female and minority-owned businesses, are getting certified? And what are some things that you've seen in other communities that we can start doing here to open up those doors of opportunity?
It's just about getting the word out. I don't think a lot of our clients come to us and they just assume that, they're like, look at me, I'm a minority. That's all I need, and they don't understand the process. So it's really about getting the word out, making sure that they understand that they should be getting the certification way before they actually need it, because if they're going and looking at a contract and find something that they're interested in, it's too late, right? By the time they actually go through the process, because it's not just about being a minority, it's making sure that you as a business owner can actually handle taking on a city contract. So getting tax returns and proving that you as a business owner are capable of doing that. So it's a process. The city, has continuously, from what I've seen over the last 10 years, the city continuously is looking at revamping it and making it more and more efficient. And so the process has definitely gotten a lot faster. And then it's, for a lot of years, the city had a certification. The state also has their own certification. ODOT has their certification. And something that the city and the state have done is that they have reciprocal certification. So if you get the minority certification through the state, you can, it basically fast tracks you to get the city certification. And that's, again, like what I've said before, that just opens up opportunities for women, for minorities, in order to see what's possible to grow the business. Something that I have always admired about the city is that the city is probably, honestly, one of the few government agencies that actually, they put their money where their mouth is. So if they, there is a goal and the goal is met. So if the set aside is 15% of all contracts are going to go to minorities, that's actually done versus other areas in our state. And that's something that I think is the city's leading the way they're leading the way in making sure that it's not just something that is said in order to get the votes. Like, they are really committed to making sure that minorities. I mean, right, let's be honest, right? Like, politicians say all kinds of stuff for us to vote for them. And then at the end, then when you actually go and try with other agencies, I'm certified, I'm a minority, and then you start looking through the contracts are something that don't really make sense, or yes, they're technically put out there for minorities, but really there isn't a single minority out there that is going to be able to bid on that contract, so then it's going to get set aside back into the general public. Thank you. So, but with the city does a good job of really taking a look at what minority businesses are actually doing business in and putting those contracts out there so that the opportunities actually exist.
So I have several questions. So we're going to try to get to those, but I have, I think, one final question I want to, I've got lots of questions, but I want to start sprinkling in questions from the public here. So Tom, Columbus is expected to grow more, grow in Central Ohio by a third by 2050. And with that growth, we're expecting to see a much more diverse Columbus, more diverse than when you grew up here and I grew up here, and certainly what we're experiencing now. So talk a little bit about why diversity and inclusion is so important to entrepreneurship and small business creation and growth.
Absolutely. I'm going to answer your question this time. I'm an entrepreneur. So I'm an entrepreneur and an advocate, is what it says. And you're probably like, what does that guy do? I get to do a lot of things. That's why I just put entrepreneur and advocate. But I'm invested in several startups here in Columbus, and there's a big focus on health and fitness and a big focus on food technology. And so we've got an innovation center over on our family campus where Donato's is in the Grote company, and we have an innovation center called The Edge, and we're filling it up with startups, and it has invigorated our companies. It's so exciting. But we're bringing talent, we're bringing businesses, we're buying into some small startups and bringing them to Columbus, which is exciting. And it's a very diverse group. They're young, they're smart, and they're diverse. And diversity and inclusion is a non-negotiable for these folks.
Yeah.
If you want to be on the leading edge and you want to grow, you better get it. And so a lot of these folks feel really good about coming to Columbus, Mayor. They're a little hesitant about Ohio sometimes, and we have to talk to them. And thanks to the mayor and the city for advocating for HB 160, which is at the State House right now. And it's hard to believe that the state of Ohio does not have LGBTQ non-discrimination in the law. Can you believe that? Isn't that ridiculous? Yeah. So people look at that. So
it's almost a situation, as Professor mentioned, there's the moral imperative and the business imperative. We're actually at a competitive disadvantage
Absolutely.
as a state.
With the Amazon thing as an example, that they're looking at things like this, right, Mayor? And so we just got to do it. And you got to get your friends across Ohio and your politicians who represent us in the State House to move on this bill.
Yeah. So first question is from Esther DeBusk. Did I pronounce that correctly? Columbus is one of the most racially and economically segregated cities in our country. What is being done to address this issue, and what more can be done? Should I pick on the professor for some initial thoughts around what you're seeing maybe in studies of communities around the country to deal with racially and economically segregated cities?
Well, housing immediately becomes the big issue. I mean, most people, or maybe most people, are not aware of why segregation came about. I mean, at one point, the policies, remember, systems that were in place and bad actors created these inequities so that redlining made it impossible for some people to get loans, and those that wanted to move into other neighborhoods, the suburbs, when everything was being pushed out, they couldn't because the banks would, there were restrictive covenants that would prevent that from happening. So, I mean, there's kind of a whole host of things that really created what we have. And unfortunately, our federal government was part of its initial creation. So there's a lot to undo. So just simply saying that, okay, let's just start from scratch doesn't really help, because now we've had decades of wealth that's been built on buying houses that are more highly valued, and it creates investment, it creates wealth for some families. So now you have an individual that would be happy to move to certain areas, but they can't afford it. Or if they have a house that's in a formerly redlined neighborhood, they're not going to get much money for it. So you have this disparity. So one of the things that's going on, which is I think is good, is to create valuable, affordable housing in areas that had been previously redlined. So you begin to make it attractive for individuals to live all over the city and in different areas. And so that's really important, and some of the work that's been done by the city to get rid of some of the blighted housing, to create more affordable housing, that's been useful. To educate individuals about what they can get, to create incentives for banks to provide loans to individuals to move in a variety of areas. I mean, it is a tall order and it's a high mountain, but it can be done if there's a commitment, certainly from the great leadership of the city, from the corporate and business community, from our banks, and also from educational institutions that let people learn more about how you can make it happen. Because there are individuals that could probably purchase housing, but they may not know what's required to provide affordable loans. There's just a host of different things that can be done.
It's going to be a little bit of rapid fire here because we got so many questions, and so I'll turn to Ariana next. You know, in January 2017, I signed the executive order to reinforce and expand what we've been doing here for decades to help refugees as they resettle here. What should this community know about our immigrant and refugee communities, and how can our city and community continue to support these communities? We have a question here from John Andrews, and I believe there are 7 questions asked on this same topic. So maybe a very large Andrews family or friends that came together. We've heard stories on an exclusion from city residents that lack identification. What can we do to welcome and include them? In addition to the executive order and other things that we have on the books, what are you hearing from folks in the community?
I think overall immigrants feel very welcome here. I'm an immigrant and truly love living in Columbus. I think, you know, it's really important for our community that we feel welcomed, that, you know, documents or not, we pay taxes. We are good standing members of society. Just like in every single segment, there are always the bad apples, right? But we don't get to be identified solely by the bad apples of our community. You know, and it's something that, you know, we're paying into a lot of these services that the undocumented community is not actually receiving benefits from. So it's actually a myth that, you know, they're getting Social Security, that they're getting Medicare, Medicaid. That's just it's not possible. And it's something that, you know, we get to figure out something that's happening in our country where we have every single one of us is here, whether you guys are, your families came generations ago or your first generation. Every single person in this country is here because our families, ourselves, we wanted a better life for ourselves and for our children. And so that's our job. I mean, our job is to continue to move that forward. So like with these dreamers, I mean, these kids are coming where, you know, I was lucky that I came and I had papers. So I've been given opportunities to go to college, to better myself, to have any job that I've really wanted. And a lot of these kids are stuck. They're amazingly talented, they're amazingly smart, and they either can't go to school because they can't afford to pay international fees, right? Since they're not technically from here, they are considered international students, and then that triples or quadruples the tuition. Right, they can't get loans, even if they were born here. So if their parents are undocumented and they come to the States and then they're born here, they can't get financial aid because their parents don't qualify, therefore they aren't qualified to get financial. So then it becomes this issue where, what are they supposed to do, right? And right now they're stuck in this limbo. So I think as a community, we really get to continue to support immigrants. They are, if you look at a lot of the major businesses in our country, successful businesses like Google, like Amazon, are all either immigrants or kids of immigrants, right? Like Jeff Bezos from Amazon, his dad was Cuban. He's first generation American. There's so much opportunity, there's so much wealth that's possible if we support them. And it's really, like, as a city, we also get to, just see what's in the gap, what's possible for them, and really welcome them with open arms.
So this might be more of it may be a question that can be answered, but might also be, particularly for the members of the Women's Commission, Christie and Gale, from Don Tavius Gerald's. As discussed, homelessness is a huge concern, especially amongst African American women. Are there programs available that seal eviction convictions if they follow a plan to get them back on their feet? I don't know the answer to that, but maybe something as the commission moves on, and we'll make sure that Shelley and the team follow up with Don Tavius. But I think we're getting short on time. So again, rapid round. I'm going to go through everybody. Maybe I'll start with Nana. I'll pick on Nana.
Right, I can be first.
So what's your vision for success? What does a diverse and inclusive community look like to you? For me, it's culture and diversity has to be, diversity and inclusion has to be embedded in our culture as a community, so that it's the lens that we view everything from, to your point, on the front end, not at the back end, checking a box before a decision that's already been made is finalized. What's your vision?
My vision is that this community becomes healthier, that they value, appreciate diversity based on who you are, not your status in life, but who you are as an individual, because that is about the common good of our community. And I know I keep saying the common good, and I'll always say that because it's about this community. It's not about Nana or any of the panelists. It is about our community, and until we value and appreciate it, we'll be lost and we will not be healthy.
Ariana, what's success look like to you?
That we continue to push the envelope, that we are quickly becoming a leader. We are getting noticed by the country, and we get to continue to innovate and keep pushing forward and becoming the model for the country.
Professor?
I'd like to hone in something that you said about culture. I would like to see us to set the standard as a culture that does value every individual, so that when the white man speaks up when he sees injustice against the black man, when the straight man speaks up when he sees injustice against the LGBTQ person, when a man will not stand for mistreatment of a woman, so that we will be able to see other individuals as equal, valued, and important, and we won't rely on the person who shares a particular identity to be the voice for equality and justice.
Right. So we'll...
What he said.
So when diversity and inclusion is being talked about by everybody, yes, not just women and people of color.
Right. That's right.
All right, so Robert, could you say that for me?
I couldn't even say it again.
I don't think you can get any better than that. I think we all want to feel that we matter. It doesn't matter who you are. And I think that when that happens for each and every person, then diversity and inclusion is real.
Yeah. Awesome.
Tom?
I agree, by the way. Wow. And I would add that my vision is the Columbus way. The Columbus way is incredible, and the Columbus way needs to be known to include diversity, inclusion, which I think it is, but also listening, respecting each other, and empathy. Empathy. We've got to put ourselves in the other people's shoes. We've got to do it, and then we've got to help lift each other up. That's what I hope to see a lot more of.
Yeah.
Christie?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said, but I dream of a Columbus where we value all people, where we invest in all people, and we accept all people.
Yes. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists again, another outstanding group. So we had lots of questions tonight, so if I didn't get to your question, we will follow up and get you an answer via email or telephone or whatever is the best way to communicate with you. Our next neighborhood conversation is March 6th at Milo Grogan Community Center. We'll be covering two more very important topics. We heard about racial and economic segregation tonight. We're going to be talking about shared prosperity and mobility and the importance in the 21st century. Look forward to the conversation in March and hope you will join us either in person or online. And now for our final benediction, it is my pleasure to introduce Pastor Amy Miracle from Broad Street Presbyterian Church. Pastor? Thank you.
In the congregation where I serve, the benediction is an open eyes kind of thing, where we look at each other, where we are looking forward. This is the part of the worship service that sends us out into the world. So in this city, in our city, may we not be satisfied. May we not be satisfied until everyone feels safe, until everyone has been heard, until everyone feels seen, until everyone is welcome at the table, until everyone is paid fairly for their work, until everyone has the opportunity to thrive. May we pray for that vision, and most importantly, may we work for it. Amen.
Thank you, Jim.
This concludes our program. Thank you for attending the 2018 State of Our City Neighborhood Conversation.